All right. Welcome, everybody, to the November Pathways to Adult Success Solutions Forum. Today, we're going to be talking about building student agency to boost success in school and life. And we have three very exciting presentations to share with you. And what really unites these presentations are, I guess, three things. One is that they're all in different ways talking about how we can empower students to sort of have agency in building their pathway to adult success, how we can increase their capacity to make informed choices, to have the experiences and the exposures, to sort of feel like that they're active participants in building their own future, and also how we can also learn from them in that process to keep improving the processes and structures we develop to support their pathways to adult success. Another thing that unites our presentations today is they're all talking about transitions in different ways. Our friends from the Chattanooga Ed Fund are really talking about the high school to college transition. Our friends from National Louis University then pick it up and say, how do you go from college to employment and so forth. And then our friends from Puget Sound are really looking at all the way back to elementary school, through elementary, middle, and high. How do we involve students in sort of building their experiences? And then the other exciting feature is our National Louis University and Puget Sound presentations were also two of our design challenge winners from 2020-21. And we're excited to hear how they sort of built this design challenge idea into the work they're doing. All right, so if we go to our next slide, just remind ourselves, if you're new here, if you've been with us for a while, that we have diverse groups, diverse viewpoints, which is great, and we want to hear from all of you. So please share your comments and your ideas and your resources in the chat as the various presentations and discussions go on. And then after each of the three presentations, we'll have 5 minutes for Q&A on that presentation, and then also some time at the end to talk in general about sort of cross-cutting themes and findings across the presentations. And at the end, as usual, we'll share out the recording and also all the resources shared both from the presenters and from folks listening. We'll send that all out to everybody after the presentation. And then just to remind ourselves that, in our Pathways to Adult Success work, we're really thinking about how we bring together keeping kids on track, giving them navigation guidance and supports, and creating critical partnerships, all supported by data. And I think all three of our presentations really speak to that. And we also know from what all of us have been hearing and learning with schools, as schools and teachers and students are transitioning back from the pandemic, and while the pandemic continues, we all know that in many ways that's been a rocky transition, right? And more than ever, I think that calls in the need for students to have that human connection to their experience in school. And really, all of our presentations today really speak to how to build that human connection and provide that sort of human connector to help students both find their agency and in this time sort of work through the impacts of the pandemic and sort of bring us in as they work and they're returning to school. So without further ado, we're going to turn to our first presenter from our friends at the Chattanooga Education Fund. I'm going to turn it over to you, Keith and all, and just ask you to introduce yourselves and then take us through your presentation.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Keith White, and I'm the Director of Research and Effectiveness at the Public Education Foundation.
Hi, I'm Dr. Michelle Caldwell, and I am the Director of College and Career Success.
Hello, I am Kristen Labs, and I am the Gateway Scholars Program Manager.
All right, I will get us started, and I'm going to set a little context before handing off to Dr. Caldwell and Kristen. So if we can move to the bar charts, this is our local context, and this was the motivator behind the idea of college advancement mentors. And what you're seeing is a slide that we call not so affectionately, the "if we do nothing" slide. And it's just a projection of a ninth grade cohort. And then you can see projected to graduate from high school, projected to enroll in post-secondary, and move through that system. So going from 1414 to 250 is not okay with us. And we, as part of the context, you should know we have an embedded advisory system in our high schools. So there's a college and career advisor full-time at each of our high schools, and they are tasked with almost solely with college and career related activities. So try very hard to keep them on those paths and not proctoring tests or helping with any other number of things people get pulled away for in school buildings. And that system has proven to work very well. It used to be housed at PEF. The district took it over. Those positions went from half-time to full-times. We're very excited about that. And we were seeing that we were doing a really good job of getting kids, or a better job of getting kids to post-secondary. But especially in our most challenged high schools, or high schools facing the most challenges, we weren't doing a very good job of getting them through post-secondary. So that's where CAMs come in. If we can move to, so college advancement mentors. If this were a Venn diagram, you would see an overlap between the college and career advisors right around the senior year of high school into graduation and into this college advancement mentor bubble. So it's meant to be a smooth handoff from high school to college. And I'm going to, speaking of handoff, I'm going to hand off to my colleagues to tell you a little bit more about college advancement mentors.
So thank you, Keith. The college advancement mentors are professionals who work with students. So there are boots on the grounds connecting with students day in and day out. Kristen's going to talk to you guys a little bit more about what they do, but part of the reason why her title says Gateway Scholars Program Manager is because that's what we call the program for students, so that there's name recognition. So I wanted to make sure that we kind of cleared that up. So the college advancement mentors are the professionals who work with the students. The Gateway Scholars is what we call the program. Kristen?
Thanks, Michelle. Yes, so just recently my title changed to program manager, but previously I was a CAM, so can speak from firsthand experience here in my role. And as was mentioned, we do work with the pipeline from high school to college and post-secondary options. And we work really closely with, as Keith mentioned, the college and career advisors that are in the high schools. And we begin building those student relationships there and begin working on the processes to get students to college, work on scholarship applications, college applications, help with FAFSA nights when those happen in the high schools. So we start building up our presence and start trying to build that trust with students early on in the relationships that we build with them over the next 2 years. So the CAM work begins with seniors in high school and carries on into matriculating into post-secondary options, and then continuing on to see them through and see them succeed from their first year to their second year as sophomores in whatever post-secondary option they choose. So we try to get involved in that process early on in the high schools and really work on our collaboration and communication, both between the students as well as the other staff and liaisons we have in the high schools and in the local colleges and other colleges in the region that we partner with. These are some other areas here on the screen where we work in with financial aid, and that's always a big part of the post-secondary process for students. And there's a lot to interpret and a lot of stress and anxiety involved in this for our students. So we are pretty involved in this. And as is overarching for this presentation, the self-efficacy piece is really a strong focus of ours too. And we don't go and do the work for students, but encourage and empower them to do it and to find the answers themselves, and then do the follow-up with them to make sure that they got the answers they need and how to frame those questions so they get to where they need to go. As is maybe the case for many of you, we've also had a lot of the social, emotional, mental health related conversations and the need for increased resources there. So those are a part of a lot of conversations we have, whether it's death in the family for students, just the stress and anxiety of moving from an all virtual high school experience into college, which many did. That was really tough for a lot of students. So a lot of our support came in with those kinds of conversations once we did build the trust for the students to open up and share what they were going through so that they could be successful academically and get through that. And then, of course, all of the academic support and advocacy that we do on their behalf, and at each of the partner colleges and universities that we work with pretty closely, where we have some data sharing relationships, we have really open collaboration and communication with those staff and faculty. Some of our CAMs even have offices on the local community college campus. So it allows us to really build those relationships. It allows us to open those lines of communication between the students, the staff, and be really supportive as in our liaison role, and help the students move towards kind of advocating for themselves through our mentor role. And I'll turn it back over to Michelle to talk more about data.
Thanks, Kristen. So as many of us do, data is sort of what tells the story for some of us. So we have the student voice, and then we also know what are the numbers showing. So we started this program in 2019 as a result of earning a Bill and Melinda Gates investment. And we wanted to see how do we get students from their fall to their spring semester? That's, most of us, and we'll talk about the fall to fall retention and persistence, but the fall to fall is irrelevant if we don't have the students there in the spring. So we started tracking fall to spring retention, just so that we could see what the numbers were saying and give us a sense of how we're working with students and if what we're doing is really working. And so if we compare that with the cohort of 2018, which that's the group of students who did not have the benefit of working with the college advancement mentors, you can see the difference. So at the local community college, the fall to spring, retention rate increased. Also at UTC, there was an increase compared to that of the fall 2018 group. And then Lane looks like a really big jump, and it looks like we did a really great job. And while we did do a really great job with our Lane College students, it's important to note that 50% only represents 2 students who were there in the fall of 2018. And because of our partnership with Lane, we were able to increase the number of students who left Chattanooga to go to Lane in the fall semester. And so 73% of those students stayed for the spring semester. So I want to make sure that we clear that up. So while we did do a great job, it's important to call out that number. Next slide, please. And then when we look at the fall to fall retention, and this is when fall of 2020. So despite COVID, we did not see the drop in persistence and retention that we were expecting, and what actually probably happened across other communities. So I think as a result of our work, we were able to mitigate the impact of COVID, and we saw an increase of students. If you again compare that to the class of 2018, who again did not have the benefit of working with the mentors. So 48% of those students came back for the fall of 2020, right in the midst of COVID at our local community college, and that in our local 4-year school, 66% of those students returned. So we are now in our 3rd year of the program. And so we're waiting to get the data for the fall 2020 cohort to look and see what the fall to fall retention rate was for that cohort of students. But we've seen some really great numbers. The students, one of the things that we also do is we get student feedback. And so by way of a survey. And so we listen to the voice of the students to learn if what we're doing and what we think we're doing, if it's really working, if it's moving the needle for them, because this is about their journey. And we want to be a part of their journey to make sure that they are successful. Next slide, please. So the next steps with our work is we are currently partnered with 3 colleges. And part of the next step is to continue to partner with other colleges across the state of Tennessee, so that as more Hamilton County students go to different colleges outside of those in our local city, that we can provide them with that same level of support. They still know that they have a support system, and that support system is homegrown, and we're working with those. So we're working with and meeting with a lot of different college professors and college admissions personnel, so that we can expand the post-secondary network beyond just the 3 colleges that we're currently working with. Another thing that we're trying to do, again, this work started as a result of a grant from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, but we wanted to figure out a way that we could make this part of the state's funding, so that this is not just a local effort, but this is something that the state can get involved in, and we're able to do this on a statewide basis and connect with more students and provide supports across the state. And then lastly, continue to track the outcomes and determine ways to continue to grow the program, but also to make sure that the program is truly working for students in ways that it's helpful for them and not for the adults who are working with them. Next slide. And this is just an image of one of our college advancement mentors, Miracle Miller, who is fielding student questions as they're walking across campus for an orientation. And we do that at every campus that we are partnered with. So we don't just point students in the direction of support services, but we actually, to Kristen's point, we walk with them to different departments where we can and help them navigate through those conversations. So again, they're able to learn how to advocate for themselves, but sometimes they need those of us who've done this to help them with that process. Any questions?
Yes, so we invite everybody to please share your questions or comments in the chat. And while you're doing that, I'll just lead off with just a comment and a question. Just on the comment side, I think what is powerful about this, right, is this idea that you're forming the relationships when they're seniors in high schools, and then you're going with them on the journey to the next place. And that's a quite unique model that when you think about it, we just need so much more of, right? Because right now, so many of our kids, we say, well, here's your high school diploma. There's a river, and it's got some stones you can maybe jump on to get across. And there's your next destination on the other side of that river. And maybe somebody will greet you if you get across the river. But it's like, it's insane because we know they have to keep going. They're not done after high school as it used to be. And now we sort of leave it up to them to navigate that distance. And we know so many kids lose momentum then, lose connection, and to really have this idea that, no, we met you here and we're going with you there. And then even to your picture, like as they do orientation, let's make sure you feel orientated to the school. You're not just left on your own, like, maybe you're first generation and then suddenly it's like, how am I supposed to know I'm supposed to like walk around to these offices? So I just think that's a powerful need that this addresses. And then my question was, I heard you comment on the COVID challenges, and I just wanted to ask you to talk a little more about the challenges you saw, Kristen and others, about kids that were virtual in high school and then suddenly are in person in college.
I'll say some of the challenges, and Kristen can add to this, is one, which I don't know that I anticipated, but social anxiety. So having been at home and now having to interact on a college campus and interact with people, and that sense of anxiety that it brings. So we've seen an increase, or we've had an increased number of referrals and taking students to counseling services, just to have someone to talk through and walk through that. And then just not knowing how to navigate through conversations with instructors and professors. And I think part of it is because so much of their work was virtual that they don't even know that they can ask questions. And so helping them sort of navigate through those conversations. Kristen?
Yeah, and I'll just add to that. Those were certainly concerns and issues that came up, as well as the financial issues and impacts of COVID and how they exacerbated some of the financial situations of students and their families, and the food insecurities, housing insecurities. So we were fortunate last year to have some additional funding to create an emergency assistance fund where students could request assistance with utilities and meeting, just paying their utility bills, in addition to some of the things that we have in the past had a fund for to help with books and supplies, some of those extra expenses that just come up for every student. But we created a special fund specifically for the COVID impacts. So yeah, utilities, rent payment. Michelle was intimately involved in that process. So she knows all those payments that were made, but it really helped fill a gap for the students that were really struggling.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Anne, do we have any questions to go to, or we'll come back to them in our general discussion?
No, I'm not seeing any questions.
Okay. All right, well, thank you. And we'll come back in our general discussion. All right, we're moving on to our second presentation from our friends from National Louis University, one of our Design Challenge winners. We'll let you introduce yourself and take it from here.
Absolutely, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Abiodun Durojaye. I oversee the Career Bridge Department at National Louis. So just wanted to kind of connect the dots from from college to career. And I think Kristen said it best earlier about connecting earlier. So today, just talking about our innovative career preparation model that drive equity in our employment outcomes. So very unique in what we do. We have almost a 3-step approach to how we look at career development journey with our students. The first is our career development curriculum. We are actually one of few in the Chicagoland region that has required career courses for our undergraduate students. So every student that comes into our course, our undergraduate students, they have to take a series of career courses. And they start them in the sophomore year. They take them all the way up until their senior year, which eventually leads to all students having paid internship. So those paid internships are either offered through the employer or through a grant that we offer our students. The second approach to that is our employer engagement process, I will say. And what that looks like is, again, the required internship in which we have our employer relations managers offering internship stipends. We do SUIT scholarships for students who are getting ready for internship. And we connect the dots between the curriculum and offering these internship support, right? So again, looking at the SUIT scholarship, making sure that students have taken their prerequisites for the internship course and ultimately getting internship in their field. And then we have our career advising. So each student is paired with a career advisor, which is a specialist. So all of our advisors are specialists in their field, and they're per program. So we have career advisors that oversee, our computer science program, our human services, our business, things like that. So we also require that our students start early on. We go into the classrooms as early as freshman year, and then we schedule mandatory appointments with our students in the junior and senior year, just helping, again, connect them to that world of career or grad school. So really looking at the holistic approach to this career preparation model. Next slide. Awesome. So the design challenge focus and employer engagement. Again, teams, we work hand in hand with our employers. We oftentimes bring employers onto campus. Our career advisors work with our employer relations manager. We also have a data analyst on our team that really we use data to enforce our practices. So in freshman year, our students have a series of milestones that they have to complete. And we have something called a career success team meeting. And in those meetings, you'll see all these stakeholders, the ERMs, the major chair, the internship manager, the career coach, the advising team. They come together and they talk about a student's career development journey. We look at, one, has the student completed a series of their milestones? And some of those milestones include, right, have they activated their handshake account? Have they met with an employer? Have they done the internship? Do they have their resume? Again, series of milestones that we have for students from freshman up until graduation. And we talk about those in this case management style, our CSTs, where they meet, 4 times in our term, and we go line by line, and we talk about our juniors and seniors that are in that internship phase. This is really critical for us because this is where we can flag at-risk students, students who have not completed milestones, students who are not engaging, whether with their career advisor or their success coach, students who are failing one of those career-related courses. We have conversations about those, and then we use our management system called EAB to kind of assign, well, what's the next step, right? Who needs to reach out to this student? What does this student need in terms of support to get them to the next level? And then again, ultimately, our hope is that our students land that internship. And like I said earlier, we try and connect all of our students to paid opportunities. So we work with employers. We try and, engage our employers in ensuring that students have internships that are paid. And then if they are not, we offered stipends for those unpaid internships, because our student population, we serve first generation, non-traditional students. So a lot of them are already working, right? So how do you now convince a working student that has all these responsibilities to take an unpaid internship? So, we try and offer this stipend for them. We try and sell the experience, and we just try again and connect the dot with these series of steps that we do. So what we're learning, it definitely takes a village, which again, those CSTs meeting to ensure that faculty, academics, staff, we are all on the same page. We are all communicating. We are all collaborating to ensure the students' ultimate success. Again, internship stipends are critical for us. 75% of internships are unpaid. So what we do, right, we try and talk to our employers to see if we can get a bonus grant, see if students can get some sort of money, and if not, we fund them through those stipends. And I think that also we just received an HSF grant. So our computer science students, at least, there's a separate grant that they're able to tap into for internships. But again, those stipends are so critical. The pandemic has allowed us to see a greater need for virtual internships. I'm sure, like a lot of other institutions, we had several internship sites or employer partners have to pull out of internships last minute when the pandemic hit, right, for various reasons, whether they were closing down, not enough people to support the intern. So we've definitely shifted to a more virtual approach. We now communicate with our employers, those that do have virtual opportunities, or those that the traditional face-to-face internship can be converted into a virtual style. So the pandemic has definitely allowed us to see how critical it is, not only to offer virtual internships, but also how critical it is to talk to our students and train and support them on how to conduct virtual internships, right? How to conduct virtual interviews, how to navigate this world of Skype, Zoom, Teams. So we've definitely learned a lot from that. And I think lastly, with the loss of internship opportunities, we have seen some students have to push back their internship by a term, or some of them, again, have to do a capstone. So oftentimes, when students don't get internships, they have the ability to qualify for a capstone, which is like a simulation where, they complete a series of projects and they get that internship credit. We oftentimes like them to go the internship route, right? Because it gives them that hands-on experience. They're communicating with an employer, a lot of things like that. And so when we're talking about building student agency, a couple things we have, these are all also milestones. We have something called our career pledge. Our pledge is something that students have to do their first term or their freshman year when they come to NLU. And it ultimately says, right, hi, my name is so-and-so. I pledge to do X, Y, and Z. These are all my milestones. I'm committed to myself. And this is why I want to do this. And the most important thing for us in that pledge is at the bottom of it, it says, my hope is to use this degree for, and then the students fill it in. So what we then do, right, is we're gonna match this with what they said freshman year to when they graduate. Were we able to help that student connect the dot? Or if something changed along the way, did we take note of that? And how do we, again, ensure that the student is getting a return on their investment? Our career action plan is something that they complete on the other side of the house, their last semester, because that is action mapping. We sit down, our career advisors sit down with the students and they map out 6 months to a year post-graduation, right? Where do you hope to be in 6 months, and what steps are you going to take to get there, and how do we support you? And then a year, and then they map it out for a year. They get a copy, we get a copy. And with our pathway students, we actually call them 6 months out. So we have career advisors reaching out to their population 6 months out, and we say, hey, where are you at with the 6 month goals, right? This is what you said at graduation. These are some of the things that you said you would do to get here. Are you there yet? Yes, no, and how do we support? And then lastly, again, those meetings with the career advisors are they're so instrumental to the work that we do. Oftentimes, career advising is an opt-in model where students have to, right, if they need us, then they come see us. But putting in those stopgaps where we're checking in and we're pushing into the classroom, I think has been something that we have learned has really helped build our student success. Right, next slide. Oh, that's it. So yeah, I guess we can take any questions that folks may have.
Thank you. And again, we invite everybody to submit your questions in the chat, and we'll get to it in 1 second. So just two things. One is again, I think it's another great example of the recognition and then the doing of actually building the pathways, not just saying they're there, but actually recognizing that a lot of supports and experiences need to be built in. So there's a real clear path from, in this case, college to, employment and post-college. And then the other thing that I was just curious about is as you mentioned, that among many first-generation students and just a large number of students in general, is they've worked all their lives and they keep working during college, and that's could be a benefit and a challenge. And then I was curious, your point, then we asked them to take this unpaid internship and we have to connect the dots and the value of that. But my other curiosity is when they do the internship, do they find it similar to the other work they've done, or do they find it different? Is it like?
That's a great question. And I will say for about 75% of our students, it's very different, because a lot of them, like our typical, right, students are working retail, or they're working in something that is absolutely not connected to their field. Whereas all the internships, we work with partners to, again, connect the dots, right? If you're going into computer science, then we expect you to have a computer science or an IT related internship, but also building the right? What transformational or transitional skills can we pull, right? If you're a waitress, what can you take from that onto your banking job or internship, right? So I do think that they're different. For our more adult students that are in industry already, then things may look a little bit different for them.
Yeah. Thanks.
Bob, there's a question in the chat. Sarah asks, have you found that the students know what questions to ask?
Yeah, I saw that question, and I wanted a little more clarity in terms of, is that asking the career advisors? Is that asking the employers, or?
Can I come off I'm going to come
Yeah,
off mute
good.
real quick.
Yes. Break the
I
fourth
was just wondering,
wall.
first generation students sometimes don't know exactly like what to expect or even what questions to ask. So I was just wondering how well prepared they are at the beginning to even know what kind of questions to ask for their.
Absolutely, Sarah. So I will say this is where those career courses are so instrumental. So in sophomore year, they take a Career 295, which is a service learning project. And what they have to do, we partner up with about 10 employers that help facilitate that class. And we pair students in groups and they solve real world problems for those employers. So that employer is saying, right, here's what's happening. Here's what you need to ask. Here are the things that you need to say. So we start building that agency early on. So really it's not us giving them guidance on the things to ask or look for, it's the employers, which I think has been really, really huge and kind of helped change, because you're right, like oftentimes they don't know what to ask or they're not prepared. So I think having the employers involved in that process has really, really changed the game for us.
We have another question, Abiodun. Gavin asks, how many students do you have? How many complete the 4-year journey? And what percentage achieve post-graduation employment?
That is a great question. So overall, and we always split it up between pathways and our total college. I actually have those numbers somewhere in there because we just got our latest fall, but I want to say for how many students are we tracking right now? Let me start there. We have in our pathways program alone. So let me clarify, pathway are our daytime FACE students. So these students come on campus, they're typically straight out of high school and they attend during the day. Then we have a separate population that either takes evening courses or nighttime courses, right? So overall, it's about 4,000 total when we count our undergraduate transfer grad school. We serve in a more proactive manner, right? Our pathways and transfer students, not necessarily the grad school. They always come to us when they need us. We're still working on a strategy for that. Our percentage that achieve post-graduation employment. So let me answer this 2 ways. We just got our report back saying 87% of our undergraduate college are 6 months out have achieved employment. We monitor it a little different with our pathway students. And one thing that we're changing now is how do we define sustainable outcomes? How do we define successful first jobs or strong first jobs? We also have Braven. We partner with Braven to do some of the work that we do. So right now, the pathway students have to achieve 4 things in order for us to qualify them as successful first job or strong or successful outcome, shall I say. 1, the degree has to offer some type of benefits. 2, the job has to offer some type of benefits. It has to be a full-time. It has to offer industry average. And lastly, it has to require a bachelor's degree. So this has been very challenging for us because students have to achieve all 4, right? If a student is 3 out of 4, we don't count that right now. So just based on those 4 criterias, we're at about 45% of our population, our pathway population, which is 127 students that graduated this past spring that are successful or sustainable outcome, we want to call it. So we're still redefining how we measure that across the institution. So again, it just, if you look at all of our populations, it's about 87%. But when we bring that criteria to those daytime, first-time students hitting all 4, we're at about 45%. And then the persistence for us in terms of completion, we're high 80s, I want to say. So the persistence is pretty high.
Hugh Wing is asking, what is the investment cost of the program in dollars per year?
Are you talking about, and Hugh, I just want some clarity because I don't want to speak to what I don't know. Are you talking about how much does it cost to go to NLU per year? Or are you talking about things we do in the career front?
I'm talking about the the career support program. I work for the City of Madison, and this is the type of investment I'd like to recommend.
Oh, awesome. So I will say we get a lot of grants that support the work that we do. So that's something we can talk offline when we look at, right, our grants or our stipends, which is huge, right? Our stipends right now are $1,500 per student for the 100-hour internship. So that's 10 hours a week. It's about roughly about $15 a year, or excuse me, $15 an hour per student. So I can absolutely get those numbers to either Ann or someone on this line after, just so they can share.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to pivot now to our third presentation and hear from Sarah and Eric and their work in Puget Sound.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks.
Well, I'll go ahead and kick us off. My name is Sarah Frazel. I'm Director of Early Warning Indicator Systems and Multi-Tiered Systems of Support at Puget Sound ESD. We serve kind of as a intermediary between two counties and all of the districts in there with the state. We do support about 30 to 40% of the state's student population. First slide. Last year, as COVID was kind of taking over, what we did was we wanted to establish an attendance and engagement network with districts within our region. One of the things that we did is really take that opportunity to say attendance isn't just butts in the seat. Let's really think about what we want to see for our students. So we gathered together folks from a bunch of different areas. You can see all those areas on there to really discuss what are those guiding principles that we would want our schools to be helping students with, identifying some overarching problems of practice, and then really developing those strategies for our authentic partnerships with our students, our families, and our communities. Next slide. So at the end of the that advisory group, we met several times over the summer of that 2020. And we came out with 4 main ideas that we really wanted schools to focus on if they were going to be part of the network. So one was building those relationships between educators and students. The second one was really providing that relevance between the learning that they're having right now and their future selves for those students. The third one was safe and secure student environments, because we know that that's one way that we can kind of keep track of students is through that attendance. If they're not here, then we kind of need to be wondering where they're at. And then fourthly, really developing those effective communication and collaboration strategies between the schools and the local resources that they had around their school district. So that would be churches, CBOs, Boys and Girls Club, things like that. Next slide. When we put out the applications, we had a lot of applicants, and we had to kind of whittle it down. We chose 12 schools to really participate. We ended up with 5 elementary, 4 middle, junior high schools, 2 high schools, 1 alternative school, and then 1 district at the very end was like, please, please, please just work with our attendance team at the district level so that we can kind of disseminate this down to the schools. So we took them on too. It was really a broad geographic representation of our districts in our region, ranging from Seattle area all the way down into Pierce County, which would be Olympia and things like that. We did choose schools that were already had a positive and supportive approach to attendance, and that we're currently in exploration or early implementation phase of starting these teams to really look at data. Next slide. So the piece that I want to talk about today real quick is really incorporating that student voice into the data cycles to create relevant change. So one thing that we did with every single school is we met individually with them, helped them kind of look through their data. Our original thought was that we would have each of the schools give students a quick 2 to 3 question survey to kind of identify where they were at, if they had a relationship with a teacher, if they were seeing that relevance between the education that they were getting then and their future selves. So we started out with these kind of questions, but our districts were all in remote learning up until April of 2021. And so a lot of them weren't going through, and then we went right into hybrid. So it was very chaotic for folks. They didn't feel like they had the time to really implement another survey. A lot of our districts or schools that we were working with already had student well-being surveys or social-emotional learning surveys. Many of them had a plethora of surveys. And so the uptake on let's do another survey with kids was kind of low. But what we did with each school was identify a 6-week problem of practice that we were going to work on, a plan, do, study, act cycle, where we would meet with the team, identify what that problem of practice was, work one strategy for 6 weeks, and then see what the end result was. By doing that, we started to look at some of the student data with the teams individually. And this is where my friend Eric Meredith comes in, because we gave some of that data to him, and he was responsible for building a data dashboard that really looked at attendance, current grades, their cumulative grades if they were in middle and high school, and also some state test scores. We got that for one of the schools, and then the other ones we were kind of playing around with, but we're going to go into a real specific example of how a middle school used that data. But I'm going to turn it over to Eric now to let him talk about his database.
All right, so my name is Eric Meredith. Can everybody see that? Okay, so this is the dashboard that we created, and it's, as Sarah mentioned, it is, it's got the grades, the attendance, and testing. This is all from one school. That was one of the issues that we ran into, was getting schools to share some data with us. So this is one example here of one school that we had in a dashboard that could be set up. And so this particular one here is for grades. I'm not going to spend too much time on the actual results in the dashboard. I just wanted to talk about basically how it's set up. So this dashboard is for grades. At the top, you can see that you can change. So there's a drop down here that allows you to change what grades you're looking at for that particular school. And all of the bar charts in the table will all change depending on which grades you're interested in looking at. So at the top, it's just basically some general statistics on the number of students. We do have it separated. You'll notice the two different colors in the bar charts is the students of color, and just yes or no if they are students of color or not. So it allows the schools to compare some different subgroups. Like I said, it's pretty basic. This one is just looking at the grade range, the percentage of students that fall in each grade range for the 2020, 2021 GPA. This is for the cumulative. Over here, we do have another drop down. It allows some comparison between grades and attendance. So you'll see each one of the bars is good attendance, okay attendance, and poor attendance. And one thing I should mention is, as Sarah mentioned, these schools were doing remote schooling at this time. And I've found that their attendance rates are pretty high compared to what would normally be expected from a school. Most students are well over 95% for an attendance rate, which seems a bit high for me. But anyway, the dashboard can be set up so that I can look at, let's say I only want to look at C range or lower students. I can see what percentage of them had good attendance, okay attendance, and poor attendance. Look at the B range, A range, and all students, and compare them all. So that's the grades dashboard. Attendance dashboard is set up very similar, same way. At the top, you can toggle the different grades that are being looked at and so forth, but it's just the same general graphs, except we're looking at attendance. Same idea here. Once again, we have a drop down. This one's for attendance, so I can look at, say I only want to look at students that had a good attendance. How did their grades shape up? Okay. Or if I want to look at only students that had poor attendance. And no surprise there, most of them are in the C range or lower. So that's the attendance dashboard. And the last one was the testing dashboard. There was 2 tests that we had available to us while the met the math standard yes or no and met ELA standard yes or no. And then the school had a math percentile test that they also had. But for the dashboard on this particular one, the drop downs are all at the top, allowing the schools to look at any kind of cross section they want. So say they only want to look at, say, 8th grade students that have poor attendance and whatever grade range they want to look at. So it allows them to cross-reference some of the attendance in the grades and see how things shake out on their testing. So that's the dashboard that we have set up, and I will send it back over to Sarah.
Eric. One particular variable combination of variables that we wanted to look at was actually the students who had the 95% attendance but were getting poor grades. And so that was a little bit of a question of even if the attendance was inflated for that particular school because of COVID, because of going from remote into hybrid, we still saw this trend of some of these students who were actively doing some level of engagement with the school, had good attendance, but their grades were the lowest grades that were possible. We also saw a huge difference between the students of color and what their grades were versus the white student populations. And so this was a trend that we took back to the school, this middle school, and we wanted to know more about kind of what was going on. And so what we did was we engaged in a inside-outside fishbowl. And what that means is that we engage the students and educators in a dialogue about this particular topic. We have the students in the center first, where they are asked questions, and then we kind of flip it where the educators are allowed to kind of reflect on what they're hearing so that we can make sure that we as the adults are truly understanding what the students are saying. Next slide. And so with this, we had to be really careful. We didn't want to create more harm for students. And so we were very careful about how we framed those questions. We didn't want to questions that could make them feel bad or traumatize or trigger them. We wanted it to really be asset-based rather than, you're attending all the time, why aren't you getting those grades? So really trying to think of like how we could phrase those questions for those students, admit where we have failed the students and move forward from there. So some of the questions that we asked the students are here, just kind of reflecting on the last year, trying to be more broad than just academics to really understand where those students' experiences were. And then when we flipped it for the teachers, we were looking at, and the counselors that were in the room, we really asked them, what did you hear? What's something that you could implement? What's your commitment to that change implementation idea? Next slide. And so a few things that we were really trying to be cautious of and careful of, mindful of, is who are we asking into the room? We were trying to really recruit educators who could be vulnerable, that demonstrated vulnerability, and really looked to hear feedback from students already. And so there's a couple of things, I'm looking at time here. So a couple of things there that we would usually check for with the educators. If you go to the next slide. For recruiting students, we also wanted to be very mindful of who we were asking. We didn't want the usual suspects, those students who were already volunteering for a lot of stuff. We really wanted to involve some of those kids who were most affected by the trends that we were seeing. And so one thing that we did was kind of mix up the group where we had a good combination of some students who had good attendance and good grades and some of the students who had good attendance and poor grades. Next slide. And the biggest thing that we really took away from this is that also we didn't want to just stop after the activity. So this was kind of a one-shot thing that they did towards the end of the year to really engage these students. But we wanted to make clear that these students weren't just giving their voice for nothing. We wanted to make it transparent about what changes we were going to implement and what that would look like for them so that they could see themselves in that. Final slide. And the results were really great. The feedback from both the adults and the students was fantastic. They were really surprised. We ended up with a lot of the students who were getting those poor grades, but were attending well. They were very shy students. So they entered the room and entered the space a little nervous, but we just were engaging with them, and they ended up speaking out so much about what their experiences were and how they would like to shape their school, really giving them that agency. Every single one of those students, even though they were really shy, said they wanted to do this activity again. They felt heard. We had one student that said they felt respected for the first time because they had never had an adult in a school system actually ask or care about their opinion. And so they are going to flip how they're choosing electives. That's one of the things that came out is Traditionally, the teachers would be choosing the electives for the next year. They flipped it so that they're going to ask the students first what electives they would like to see, and then check with the teachers on who can actually implement those classes and electives for the next year. So I think I can end there just for the sake of time. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks. Thanks, Sarah. Please, folks, put questions in the chat, and I'll start again with a reflection. I think, you know, what struck me, Sarah and Erica, in some ways, you were working to sort of use the same care to build student agency that some of our earlier presenters were using to create transitions, right? And recognizing that these are things we have to actively sort of engineer. We can't just sort of say, oh, give student voice, let them talk, let's see what they tell us. And then it's sort of that really struck me. And then I also felt like we were left with a little bit of a cliffhanger. And I know because you were just starting out, and it was the end of a COVID year. But I was curious if it did generate any insights as to this dichotomy between attendance and grades for students of color and not.
Yeah, I think there were a couple pieces. Like one, for example, is that the students who were in that room said, they take a ton of surveys in there already. And so they were like, please don't give us another survey. This actually allowed us to feel heard, but really trying to generate like, what are those things that we can implement during the school day? And so electives with them to really engage the students so that it doesn't feel like just a lot of things that aren't relevant to their education or anything like that. I think the other big piece that came out of this is that the counselors and the teachers who were in the room felt like they had a better relationship with these students who were pretty shy typically and were used to just kind of flying under the radar. And so I think going forward, this school is definitely doing this again this year. They were very excited about it. But I think that's one of the big takeaways is that the students don't want another survey. They feel like they give these answers to the surveys and they never hear what happens back.
Yeah.
And so by actually engaging this voice, they felt heard, they felt respected. And I think it changed for the educators as well, that they felt like they had relationships with these students now. In the coming year, it won't be the same group of students every time. They're going to kind of flip it around based on which students are most affected by the trends that they're trying to look at in the school.
Great, thanks. Anne, any comments or questions?
Keith says, this is Keith White who presented earlier. I really appreciate how you use data to humanize the students and collect growth-centered feedback. Excellent work. My inner developmental psychologist is smiling.
Thank you, Keith.
All right, well, you can always follow up with our presenters, and we will be sharing this with you. I want to thank everybody for a really great discussion today at how to both really build these transitions from high school to college and from college out, and then also how to really help engineer student voice so it's an authentic thing, and then how all those together build agency. I think there's just a lot to be learned across these things about how we create environments that are just better and enable our students to thrive and have agency than when we just leave it up to them to figure out how to get it done. Our next solutions forum is in mid-December. We're going to be tackling the high school and post-secondary success challenge for students with disabilities. With that, we want to say.
We have one more question in the chat.
Oh, one more
if you guys are
question?
willing, if you're willing. Yes.
Well, of course we are.
From Ola, she asked, what did you find was the relationship between children attendance and academic performance?
I mean, I think in general, you could see the database that Eric had pulled together. It was traditionally what we would expect. Kids who are attending at high rates also had high academic performance. But there were these, what we wanted to look at was really that combination of kids who had high attendance, but the poor grades, because we felt like that was a better representation of disengagement for these students. Eric, did you want to add anything else?
Yeah, it was, like Sarah said, it was mostly what you would expect. If the students weren't at school, they didn't do as well on their grades. One thing I will mention about that is that was much more pronounced with the students of color versus the white students.
problem, Ola. Thanks.
All right. And with that, we just want to thank you, be well and onwards, and we'll see you again next month.